Chapter 1: Why Pressure Destroys Clear Thinking. Pressure does not confuse your mind by accident. It does it by design. When pressure appears, your nervous system does not ask for wisdom. It asks for safety. It scans for threat, urgency, and risk. And the moment it decides something is at stake, it shifts control away from deliberate thinking and hands it to survival mechanisms that evolved long before clarity ever mattered. This is why intelligent people still make poor decisions under pressure. Under stress, the mind narrows. Attention collapses. Options disappear. You stop seeing the whole picture and begin reacting to fragments. A single comment feels like an attack. A small problem feels like a crisis. Time feels compressed. Everything feels urgent, even when it isn't. Pressure does not make you think worse. It makes you think smaller. Your body tightens. Your breathing shortens. Your thoughts speed up, but your awareness shrinks. This creates the illusion of productivity, movement, action, response without the substance of clarity. You feel busy, decisive, and alert. Yet afterward, you often realize you acted too fast, spoke too much, or chose from fear instead of judgment. This is not weakness. It is biology. The human brain was not designed for calm reasoning in high-stakes situations. It was designed to survive. When pressure rises, the brain prioritizes speed over accuracy, immediate relief over long-term outcomes, reaction over reflection. And unless you have trained against this default, pressure will always win. Most people misunderstand this dynamic. They believe clear thinking fails because they are bad under stress or not confident enough. But confidence does not create clarity. Control does. Clarity requires space. Pressure removes space. That is the real danger. When space disappears, emotion fills the gap. Fear, anger, urgency, and pride rush in to complete the story. You begin interpreting instead of observing. You assume instead of verifying. You defend instead of understanding. And once emotion takes the lead, your decisions become about managing discomfort, not solving reality. Think back to a moment when pressure got the better of you. Maybe you sent a message too quickly. Maybe you agreed to something you later regretted. Maybe you escalated a conflict that did not need escalation. At the time, it felt justified, necessary, obvious. Only later did clarity return. That delay is the cost of untrained thinking. Pressure does not reveal who you are. It amplifies what you have not trained. If you have not trained patience, pressure amplifies impatience. If you have not trained restraint, pressure amplifies impulsiveness. If you have not trained self-awareness, pressure amplifies ego. This is why people who appear calm in normal conditions suddenly fall apart when stakes rise. Their calm was conditional. It depended on comfort. The moment comfort vanished, so did their clarity. But pressure itself is not the enemy. Pressure is neutral. It is information. It shows you exactly where your mental habits live. It exposes whether your thinking is guided by principles or by feelings. It reveals whether your decisions come from values or from fear of consequences. People who think clearly under pressure are not immune to stress. They simply recognize what pressure does to the mind and refuse to let it drive unchecked. They understand one critical truth. The first loss under pressure is perspective. When pressure hits, the mind exaggerates. A single outcome becomes everything. A temporary setback feels permanent. A small mistake feels fatal. The future collapses into a narrow tunnel where only one result seems acceptable. In that tunnel, there is no room for nuance, patience, or strategy. This is where clear thinking breaks. Because clear thinking depends on proportion, on context, on the ability to see more than one move ahead. Pressure strips that away by forcing your attention into the present moment without awareness. You are here, but you are not grounded. You are alert, but not stable. You are awake, but not aware. And awareness is the foundation of clarity. Without awareness, the mind confuses urgency with importance. It treats loud emotions as reliable signals. It mistakes discomfort for danger. And it pushes you toward actions that reduce tension quickly rather than decisions that serve you well. This is why pressure leads to overreactions, defensive words, rushed commitments, and decisions that feel strong in the moment but weak in hindsight. The solution is not to eliminate pressure. The solution is to stop letting pressure collapse your inner space. Clear thinkers do something different when pressure arrives. They do not try to outthink the situation. They do not force confidence. They do not rush to regain control externally. They slow down internally. They recognize the physiological shift. They notice the tightening. They feel the urge to react, and they pause. Not because they are indecisive, but because they understand that the first impulse under pressure is rarely the best one. That pause is everything. It interrupts the survival loop. It widens attention. It restores proportion. It gives the mind just enough space to move from reaction to choice. And this is the skill you will begin training throughout this audiobook. Because once you understand why pressure destroys clear thinking, you stop blaming yourself for the effect and start taking responsibility for the training. Pressure will always test you. But it does not have to control you. Clarity under pressure is not a gift. It is a practiced response. And practice begins with awareness. Chapter 2, The Difference Between Reacting and Choosing. Most mistakes under pressure are not caused by bad intentions. They are caused by unexamined reactions. A reaction is fast, automatic, and emotional. A choice is slower, deliberate, and conscious. The problem is that under pressure, these two feel identical. When something triggers you, an accusation, a deadline, a sudden change, the body responds before the mind understands. Muscles tense. Breathing shifts. Thoughts rush forward with a single goal. Respond now. Say something. Do something. End the discomfort. That urge feels urgent because it is biological. But urgency does not mean accuracy. Reacting is the mind trying to protect itself from discomfort. Choosing is the mind deciding what actually matters. This distinction changes everything. When you react, you are not deciding. You are obeying. You are following the strongest internal signal in that moment, usually fear, anger, or the need to regain control. The action may look confident, decisive, or forceful, but it is not grounded. It is driven. When you choose, you introduce intention. You acknowledge the feeling without surrendering to it. You create a gap between what happens and what you do next. That gap is small, often just a few seconds, but it is powerful. That gap is where freedom lives. Most people live without it. They believe they are choosing, but they are mostly reacting. Reacting to tone. Reacting to pressure. Reacting to expectations. Reacting to imagined outcomes. Their days become a series of emotional impulses stitched together by rationalizations afterward. Under pressure, this pattern intensifies. Someone challenges you and you interrupt. Someone doubts you and you defend. Someone rushes you and you rush back. Each reaction feels justified, logical, necessary. But when you look back, you often see that the reaction made things worse. It escalated tension. It closed options. It locked you into a path you would not have chosen calmly. That is the cost of reaction. Choosing feels different. Choosing does not remove emotion. It contains it. You still feel the heat. You still feel the pull. But instead of moving immediately, you observe it. You recognize the impulse without acting on it. You allow the emotion to exist without letting it decide. This does not require long reflection. It requires awareness. The moment you notice, I feel the urge to react, you have already stepped out of reaction. That awareness creates leverage. Reacting shrinks perspective. Choosing expands it. When you choose, you are no longer trying to end the feeling. You are asking better questions. What is actually happening? What matters here? What response aligns with my values, not my emotions? These questions do not appear when the mind is rushing. They appear only when there is space. And space is not given under pressure. It is taken. This is why people who think clearly under pressure appear calmer and more grounded. They are not slower in action. They are slower in impulse. They do not confuse speed with effectiveness. They understand that one extra moment of restraint can prevent hours of regret. Reacting feels powerful in the moment. Choosing feels powerful afterward. One of the biggest illusions under pressure is the belief that immediate response equals strength. In reality, an uncontrolled reaction is a loss of control. Strength is shown by the ability to pause when everything inside you wants to move. That pause is not passive. It is active restraint. It signals to your nervous system that you are not in danger. It lowers internal noise. It restores access to higher thinking. And once that happens, your response changes. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. This is why reacting gives power away and choosing gives it back. When you react, circumstances control you. When you choose, you control yourself. Throughout this audiobook, you will return to this distinction again and again, not as an idea, but as a practice. Because the quality of your decisions under pressure depends entirely on how often you move from reaction to choice. You do not need to eliminate reactions. You need to interrupt them. And the interruption begins with a simple disciplined habit. Notice the urge before obeying it. That is where clear thinking starts. Chapter 3, How to Slow Your Mind When Everything Feels Urgent. Urgency is one of the most convincing illusions the mind creates under pressure. It feels real. It feels immediate. And it feels dangerous to ignore. But urgency is often a signal of internal overload, not external necessity. When pressure rises, the mind speeds up to keep control. Thoughts stack on top of each other. Scenarios multiply. Consequences feel closer than they are. The nervous system interprets speed as safety. Move fast so nothing gets worse. And in that rush, clarity is the first thing sacrificed. Slowing your mind does not mean slowing your actions. It means slowing the noise that drives them. Most people try to manage urgency by pushing harder. They multitask. They talk faster. They decide quicker. But speed stacked on speed only increases chaos. The mind becomes crowded, not clear. You are moving, but you are not steering. Clear thinkers do the opposite. When everything feels urgent, they reduce pace internally before responding externally. They understand a simple truth. If the mind is racing, any decision made from it will inherit that instability. Slowing the mind begins with the body. Under pressure, the body tightens automatically. Breathing becomes shallow. Shoulders rise. The jaw clenches. These are not small details. They are signals to the brain that something is wrong. As long as the body signals danger, the mind will not slow. This is why the fastest way to regain clarity is not to think differently, but to breathe differently. A slower breath tells the nervous system there is no immediate threat. It widens attention. It interrupts the loop of urgency. And once the body settles, the mind follows. This is not relaxation. It is regulation. When the breath slows, thoughts lose their sharp edge. The mind stops sprinting ahead. You begin to notice what is actually happening instead of what might happen. That shift alone can change the quality of a decision. Try this the next time pressure rises. Breathe in slowly for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale slowly for 6 seconds. Repeat it a few times without forcing calm. You are not trying to erase stress. You are trying to stop stress from driving your thinking. The next step is narrowing focus. Urgency convinces you that everything matters at once. Clear thinking requires choosing what matters now. Under pressure, the mind wants to hold every variable. That creates overwhelm. Instead, simplify. Ask yourself one grounding question. What is the next right step? Not the perfect step. Not the final outcome. Just the next right step. This question cuts through mental clutter. It turns chaos into sequence. And sequence restores control. Slowing the mind also requires reducing input. When you are under pressure, more information rarely creates clarity. It creates confusion. Notifications, opinions, and constant noise pile onto an already stressed system. Clear thinkers intentionally limit what they take in during high-pressure moments. They stop scrolling. They stop seeking reassurance from everyone. They stop chasing certainty. They choose stillness over stimulation. This does not mean avoidance. It means protecting attention. Because attention is the currency of clarity. Wherever your attention goes, your thinking follows. When your attention is scattered, your thinking becomes reactive. When your attention is steady, your thinking becomes deliberate. This is why calm people are often selective with what they engage in. They understand that mental energy is limited. Every unnecessary distraction weakens their ability to think clearly when it matters most. Another important skill is resisting false urgency. False urgency demands immediate action without understanding. True urgency allows calm action with clarity. Learning the difference takes practice. At first, slowing down may feel uncomfortable. Your mind will argue that you are falling behind. That something bad will happen if you do not act immediately. This is the survival voice. It is loud, persuasive, and often wrong. Do not fight it. Do not obey it. Notice it. Then return to the present moment. Breathe. Narrow focus. Take one deliberate step. Over time, this changes how pressure feels. Situations that once triggered panic begin to feel manageable. Not because they became easier, but because you became steadier. You stop confusing motion with progress. You stop treating anxiety like instruction. You stop rushing just because your mind is racing. And in that steadiness, clarity returns. Speed creates mistakes. Calm creates clarity. And clarity begins the moment you decide to slow your inner world, even when the outer world refuses to slow with you. Chapter 4: Separating Facts from Emotions. One of the greatest threats to clear thinking under pressure is not emotion itself. It is confusion between what you feel and what is actually happening. Emotions are powerful. They are fast. They demand attention. Under pressure, they speak loudly and confidently, often presenting themselves as facts. Fear says, "This is dangerous." Anger says, "This is unacceptable." Anxiety says, "Something is about to go wrong." And because these feelings arrive with intensity, the mind assumes they must be true. But emotions are not long-term reflections. They are short-term signals. They tell you that something matters to you. They do not always tell you what is true. Clear thinking begins the moment you stop treating every emotion like a reliable conclusion. Under pressure, this becomes difficult because emotions narrow attention. When fear rises, the mind searches for evidence of danger. When anger rises, the mind searches for evidence of disrespect. When insecurity rises, the mind searches for evidence of rejection. You stop observing reality and begin filtering it through feeling. The emotional state becomes the lens. And once that happens, neutral events start looking personal. Temporary problems start looking permanent. Uncertainty starts feeling like catastrophe. This is why people under pressure often create stories before they collect facts. A delayed reply becomes proof of disrespect. A mistake becomes proof of failure. A disagreement becomes proof that everything is falling apart. The emotion arrives first, and the mind rushes to justify it afterward. That process feels logical in the moment because the body is convinced the feeling must mean something urgent. But clarity requires a different approach. Clear thinkers separate experience from interpretation. They ask, what do I know for certain? What am I assuming? What evidence actually supports this thought? These questions create distance between reality and emotional narrative. They interrupt exaggeration. They weaken the tendency to personalize everything. Most importantly, they restore proportion. Facts are usually simple. Someone said something. A deadline changed. A plan failed. An opportunity disappeared. Emotions add layers. They don't respect me. I will never recover from this. Everything is going wrong. These interpretations may feel true, but feelings are not evidence. They are internal reactions shaped by memory, fear, expectations, and stress. This does not mean emotions should be ignored. Emotions contain information. Fear may reveal uncertainty. Anger may reveal violated boundaries. Sadness may reveal loss. But information is not instruction. You do not need to obey every emotion simply because it appears. You need to understand it without surrendering your judgment to it. One of the most powerful habits under pressure is learning to describe situations plainly. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Plainly. Instead of saying, everything is falling apart, say, this situation is difficult and I do not yet know the outcome. Instead of saying, they ruined everything, say, something happened that I strongly disagree with. This shift in language matters because the words you use shape the emotional intensity you experience. The mind believes the stories it repeats. Catastrophic language creates catastrophic thinking. Precise language creates clearer thinking. Calm people are not calm because they feel less emotion. They are calm because they interpret events more accurately. Under pressure, accuracy becomes more important than intensity. The goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to stop emotions from becoming distorted versions of reality. This requires honesty. Sometimes your fear is exaggerating. Sometimes your anger is masking insecurity. Sometimes your anxiety is predicting outcomes that have not happened. Without awareness, these emotional distortions quietly control behavior. You speak defensively. You withdraw unnecessarily. You attack when you should listen. You panic when patience would serve you better. And afterward, once emotion settles, clarity returns and you realize the situation was never as absolute as it felt. This is why emotional regulation is not weakness. It is accuracy. The clearer your perception becomes, the less power temporary emotions have over permanent decisions. One useful practice is learning to pause before labeling a situation. Instead of immediately deciding, this is terrible, ask yourself. Is this a fact or a feeling? What else could be true? What am I missing right now? These questions reopen the mind. Because pressure closes perspective, and perspective is necessary for clear thinking. Another important shift is understanding that emotions change faster than reality. A feeling can completely transform within an hour, while the consequences of your actions may remain for years. This is why decisions made during emotional peaks are often regretted. Chapter 5: The Power of the Pause. Most people believe strength under pressure comes from knowing exactly what to do. But often, strength begins with not reacting immediately. The pause is one of the most underestimated skills in clear thinking. It looks small from the outside. A breath before speaking. A moment of silence before answering. A few seconds of restraint before acting. But internally, that pause changes everything. Because pressure creates momentum. When emotions rise, the mind wants movement. It wants to close the discomfort as quickly as possible. Say something. Defend yourself. Fix it immediately. Regain control. The nervous system interprets stillness as risk and impulsive action as safety. This is why people interrupt before understanding. Why they send messages they later regret. Why they make decisions just to escape uncertainty. The mind under pressure hates unfinished emotion. The pause interrupts this pattern. It breaks the automatic chain between stimulus and response. It creates a space where awareness can return before action is taken. And that space is where intelligence becomes usable. Without a pause, knowledge means very little. Values disappear under emotional intensity. Good intentions collapse under urgency. The reaction takes over before wisdom has time to arrive. The pause gives wisdom time to catch up. This is why calm people often seem powerful in difficult situations. Not because they are emotionless, but because they are not controlled by the first emotional wave. They allow the wave to pass before deciding what deserves action. Most reactions lose strength if you do not feed them immediately. Anger softens. Fear becomes clearer. Embarrassment becomes manageable. Urgency loses exaggeration. But only if you pause long enough to let the nervous system settle. The problem is that pausing feels uncomfortable. When pressure is high, silence can feel weak. Waiting can feel dangerous. Stillness can feel like losing control. The ego wants immediate expression because expression creates temporary relief. But relief is not the same as clarity. Many people destroy opportunities, relationships, and trust because they chase immediate emotional relief instead of long-term alignment. They speak to release tension, not to solve the problem. The pause protects you from this. It allows you to ask, what response will I respect later? Am I trying to solve the issue or just reduce my discomfort? Will this action still make sense once emotion settles? These questions rarely appear in reactive moments. They appear when the mind has room to think beyond survival. And the pause creates that room. One sentence spoken impulsively can create consequences that last for years. One moment of restraint can prevent damage that never needed to happen. This is the hidden power of the pause. It protects your future from your temporary emotions. Clear thinkers understand something most people ignore. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every thought deserves action. Not every situation deserves an immediate response. Sometimes the strongest move is waiting long enough to see clearly. This does not mean avoidance. Avoidance is fear pretending to be patience. A true pause is intentional. You are not escaping the situation. You are stabilizing yourself before engaging with it. There is a major difference. Avoidance delays reality. The pause prepares you for reality. The more pressure rises, the more valuable this skill becomes. In conflict, the pause prevents escalation. In decision-making, the pause restores perspective. In uncertainty, the pause protects judgment. Even physically, the pause changes the nervous system. A slow breath. Relaxed shoulders. Unclenching the jaw. These signals communicate safety to the brain. And when the brain senses safety, higher thinking returns. The pause is not passive. It is regulation in action. At first, this practice may feel unnatural. Your mind will insist that immediate action is necessary. You may feel the urge to fill silence, explain yourself, or regain control instantly. Do not mistake that urge for wisdom. Often, it is simply discomfort demanding movement. The people who think clearly under pressure train themselves to tolerate that discomfort without obeying it. That is emotional discipline. And emotional discipline creates reliable judgment. Over time, the pause becomes more natural. You stop seeing silence as weakness. You stop fearing temporary uncertainty. You become less controlled by urgency because you trust your ability to respond deliberately. You realize that calm is not the absence of pressure. Calm is the ability to remain steady inside it. The pause is where that steadiness begins. Before every clear decision, there is usually a moment where a reaction could have happened but did not. That moment matters more than most people realize. Because your life is shaped not only by what you choose to do, but also by what you choose not to do in emotional moments. The pause gives you that choice. And the more you practice it, the less pressure controls your mind. Chapter 6, Training Your Mind Before Pressure Arrives. Most people wait until pressure appears before trying to become calm. That is why they fail. Pressure does not create your habits. It reveals them. When stakes rise, the mind does not suddenly become disciplined, patient, or clear. It falls back on what has already been practiced. Under pressure, you do not rise to your intentions. You return to your training. This is why preparation matters more than motivation. Motivation is emotional. Training is structural. Motivation changes with mood. Training remains when mood disappears. People who remain steady in difficult moments are usually not improvising calm. They have built it long before the situation arrived. Through repetition, awareness, and small daily choices, they train their nervous system not to panic every time discomfort appears. This is important to understand. Clear thinking under pressure is not built during the crisis. It is built before the crisis. The athlete does not learn control during the competition. The pilot does not learn stability during turbulence. The surgeon does not learn precision during the emergency. They train beforehand so that pressure does not completely override their thinking when the moment comes. Your mind works the same way. Every day, you are practicing something. You are either training patience or impatience. Training focus or distraction. Training awareness or impulsiveness. Small repeated behaviors become automatic responses under stress. This is why daily habits matter more than occasional breakthroughs. A person who constantly reacts emotionally in small situations will struggle to remain calm in large ones. A person who cannot tolerate minor discomfort will collapse under major uncertainty. Pressure magnifies patterns that already exist. The good news is that patterns can be changed. Mental clarity is trainable because the brain adapts to repetition. What you repeatedly practice becomes easier to access under pressure. If you repeatedly practice slowing down before responding, your pause becomes stronger. If you repeatedly practice observing emotions without obeying them, emotional control improves. If you repeatedly practice returning attention to the present moment, your mind becomes less chaotic under stress. Training begins in ordinary moments. How you respond to inconvenience matters. How you respond to delays matters. How you respond when someone disagrees with you matters. Most people ignore these moments because they seem small. But small moments are rehearsals for larger ones. Every impatient reaction strengthens impatience. Every deliberate response strengthens clarity. This is why discipline is not punishment. It is conditioning. You are teaching your mind how to behave when pressure arrives. One of the most effective forms of mental training is learning to stay present during discomfort. Most people escape discomfort immediately. They distract themselves. They seek reassurance. They avoid silence. They rush toward relief. But every time you escape discomfort instantly, you teach your nervous system that discomfort is dangerous. And if discomfort feels dangerous, pressure will always overwhelm you. Clear thinkers train differently. They stay with difficult emotions long enough to realize they are survivable. They allow uncertainty without immediately forcing conclusions. They allow silence without filling it nervously. They allow tension without rushing to remove it. This builds emotional endurance. And emotional endurance creates stability under pressure. Another important part of training is attention control. Modern life constantly weakens attention. Endless scrolling, constant notifications, and non-stop stimulation condition the mind to seek novelty every few seconds. Over time, this creates internal restlessness. A restless mind struggles under pressure because it cannot stay focused long enough to think clearly. This is why training attention matters. Simple practices help rebuild it. Finishing one task without switching. Sitting quietly without stimulation. Reading slowly without checking your phone. Listening fully before responding. These actions seem insignificant, but they strengthen concentration. And concentration is necessary for clarity. Training also requires self-observation. You cannot change patterns you refuse to notice. Many people believe they are calm until pressure exposes their habits. They interrupt. Defend. Panic. Over-explain. Withdraw. Control. These reactions often happen automatically because they have never been examined honestly. Awareness changes that. The moment you notice a pattern clearly, you create the possibility of interrupting it. This is why reflection matters. After difficult situations, ask yourself, what triggered me? What emotion took control? What would a clearer response have looked like? What can I practice next time? These questions turn mistakes into training instead of shame. Clear thinkers are not perfect. They simply learn faster from pressure because they study their reactions instead of denying them. Over time, training changes your relationship with pressure itself. You stop seeing pressure as proof that something is wrong. You stop treating discomfort like an emergency. You stop expecting confidence before action. Instead, you begin trusting your ability to remain steady even when emotions rise. That trust is powerful. Because the goal is not to remove fear. The goal is to stop fear from controlling your behavior. Training gives you that ability. And the more consistently you practice, the more natural clarity becomes. Eventually, situations that once overwhelmed you begin to feel manageable. Not because life became easier, but because your mind became stronger. Pressure still arrives. Emotions still appear. Uncertainty still exists. But now there is structure beneath the chaos. A trained mind. A steadier nervous system. A wider space between feeling and action. And inside that space, clear thinking becomes possible. Chapter 7, Staying Calm When Others Panic. Pressure becomes harder to manage when it spreads from other people. Fear is contagious. Panic is contagious. Urgency is contagious. When people around you lose control emotionally, the nervous system automatically reacts. Voices rise. Energy shifts. Attention narrows. The environment begins pulling your mind into the same state of confusion and reactivity. This is why many people think clearly alone but lose clarity around emotional chaos. Someone panics, and they panic too. Someone becomes angry, and they become defensive. Someone rushes, and they abandon their own judgment to match the urgency. The mind naturally mirrors the emotional state of its environment. Without awareness, you absorb pressure that was never originally yours. This is one of the most important skills in clear thinking. Learning to remain emotionally steady in emotionally unstable environments. Because leadership is not tested during calm moments. It is tested when confusion spreads. Anyone can appear composed when nothing is at stake. The real test comes when people around you are emotional, reactive, impatient, or afraid. Can you stay grounded without absorbing their state? Most people cannot. They confuse another person's emotional intensity with objective truth. If someone sounds certain, loud, or urgent, they assume immediate action is necessary. But emotional intensity is not evidence of accuracy. A panicked person can make a situation feel catastrophic even when it is manageable. This is why calm people become anchors during chaos. Not because they ignore the seriousness of situations, but because they refuse to let emotional contagion replace clear perception. When others panic, your first responsibility is not controlling them. It is stabilizing yourself. This begins internally. Notice your breathing. Notice your posture. Notice the urge to match their emotional energy. The body often reacts before the mind realizes it. Heart rate rises. Muscles tighten. Speech speeds up. Without awareness, you unconsciously synchronize with the chaos around you. The moment you notice this happening, slow yourself deliberately. Lower your voice. Slow your breathing. Pause before speaking. These small actions interrupt emotional contagion. Calm is contagious too. One steady person can change the emotional direction of an entire room. This is why truly calm people often appear powerful without forcing authority. Their nervous system communicates stability. Others feel it even when no words are spoken. Under pressure, people look for certainty. If you remain grounded, you create psychological safety for others. That steadiness allows clearer thinking to return collectively, not just individually. But staying calm around panic requires emotional boundaries. Not every emotion around you belongs to you. This is important. Many people absorb stress automatically because they feel responsible for fixing everyone's emotional state. They carry anxiety that is not theirs. They internalize urgency they did not create. Over time, this becomes exhausting. Clear thinkers learn to care without absorbing. They can empathize without drowning emotionally. They can listen without losing perspective. They can support others without abandoning self-control. This balance matters because panic often pressures you into abandoning your own judgment. Someone says, "We have to act right now." Someone says, "Everything is falling apart." Someone says, "There is no time to think." And if you are not grounded, their certainty overrides your awareness. But pressure from others does not remove your responsibility to think clearly. In fact, it increases it. One of the most dangerous moments in any stressful situation is when collective emotion replaces independent thinking. Groups become reactive. People stop questioning assumptions. Fear amplifies itself through repetition. This happens in workplaces, relationships, families, and entire societies. Emotion spreads faster than reason. That is why maintaining clarity around emotional people is not selfish. It is necessary. Sometimes the calmest person in the room is the only reason things do not become worse. This does not mean suppressing emotion or acting cold. Calmness is not emotional distance. It is emotional regulation. You can acknowledge fear without feeding panic. You can recognize urgency without losing clarity. You can face difficulty without becoming emotionally chaotic. Another important skill is resisting the pressure to perform certainty. When others panic, they often demand immediate answers. They want guarantees. They want confidence. And many people respond by pretending to know more than they do just to reduce tension. But false certainty creates fragile decisions. Clear thinkers are comfortable saying, "I need a moment to think. I do not know yet. Let's focus on what we do know." These responses stabilize situations because they return attention to reality, instead of emotional escalation. Calm people simplify chaos. They focus on facts. They slow the pace. They direct attention toward the next useful action. This is why steadiness creates trust. Not because calm people always have answers, but because they remain functional when others become reactive. And functionality under pressure is rare. The truth is that people will remember how you behave during difficult moments far more than how you behave during easy ones. Pressure reveals emotional discipline. Can you stay respectful when others become emotional? Can you stay thoughtful when others rush? Can you stay grounded when uncertainty spreads? These are the moments that define character. Over time, staying calm around panic becomes easier because you stop treating emotional energy as something you must automatically absorb. You realize that another person's fear does not need to become your fear. Another person's urgency does not need to become your urgency. Another person's chaos does not need to become your state of mind. You can remain present without becoming consumed. And that ability changes everything. Because clear thinking is not only about managing your own pressure. It is also about maintaining stability when pressure spreads through the people around you. That steadiness is rare. And rare qualities become valuable in difficult moments. Chapter 8, Making Decisions Without Perfect Certainty. One of the biggest reasons people lose clarity under pressure is the belief that they must feel completely certain before they act. They wait for the perfect answer. The perfect timing. The perfect guarantee. But pressure rarely offers certainty. Most important decisions in life are made with incomplete information, mixed emotions, and uncertain outcomes. If you wait until fear disappears completely, you will wait forever. Clear thinkers understand this. Clarity is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the ability to move wisely despite uncertainty. Many people confuse uncertainty with danger. The moment they do not know exactly what will happen, anxiety takes over. The mind starts searching desperately for reassurance. What if this goes wrong? What if I regret this? What if I fail? These questions create paralysis because they demand impossible answers. No decision comes with total control over the future. And yet life keeps moving. Pressure becomes overwhelming when you believe uncertainty itself is unacceptable. But uncertainty is not a flaw in life. It is part of life. Every meaningful decision contains risk. Relationships involve uncertainty. Career choices involve uncertainty. Growth involves uncertainty. Responsibility involves uncertainty. Trying to eliminate all uncertainty before acting usually leads to avoidance disguised as caution. The mind says, I just need more time. I need to be completely sure. I need one more sign. But often, the real issue is fear of discomfort. Clear thinkers do not demand certainty before acting. They demand alignment. They ask, does this decision align with my values? Does it make sense based on the information I currently have? Am I choosing from clarity or from fear? These questions create movement without recklessness. Because good decisions are not guaranteed outcomes. Good decisions are thoughtful actions made with the best awareness available at the time. This distinction matters. Sometimes you can make the right decision and still experience a difficult outcome. Sometimes you can make a careless decision and temporarily get lucky. Outcomes alone do not define wisdom. Clear thinking is about process, not control. Under pressure, the mind becomes obsessed with eliminating risk completely. But life does not reward perfect prediction. It rewards adaptability, steadiness, and the ability to respond intelligently as situations unfold. People who require total certainty before acting often stay stuck. They overthink, overanalyze, rehearse endless scenarios, delay decisions until opportunities disappear. The mind mistakes endless thinking for preparation. But overthinking is often emotional avoidance wearing the mask of intelligence. At some point, thinking stops producing clarity and starts producing noise. This is where trust becomes important. Not blind confidence. Not arrogance. Self-trust. Trust in your ability to handle what comes next, even if things do not go perfectly. Clear thinkers understand they cannot control every outcome. But they can control how they meet outcomes. That mindset changes pressure completely. Instead of asking, what if this goes wrong, they ask, if it does go wrong, can I handle it thoughtfully? Usually, the answer is yes. Most people are far more capable than fear allows them to believe. Another important shift is accepting that discomfort often accompanies correct decisions. A difficult conversation may still feel uncomfortable even if it is necessary. A major opportunity may still create fear even if it is right for you. Pressure does not always mean stop. Sometimes pressure simply means something important is happening. This is why emotional discomfort alone should not determine your decisions. Fear can appear in both dangerous situations and meaningful growth. The key is learning to distinguish panic from intuition. Panic is loud, rushed, and catastrophic. Intuition is quieter, steadier, and clearer. Panic demands immediate escape. Intuition points toward deeper alignment. The more emotionally regulated you become, the easier it is to hear the difference. Decision-making under pressure also improves when you stop demanding perfect outcomes from yourself. Many people fear decisions because they fear mistakes. They believe one wrong move will ruin everything. This creates enormous internal pressure and distorted thinking. But no one thinks clearly all the time. Even wise people make imperfect decisions because reality is complex. The goal is not perfection. The goal is responsiveness. Can you adjust when new information appears? Can you admit when something is not working? Can you stay grounded instead of collapsing into shame? These abilities matter far more than trying to predict every outcome perfectly beforehand. A flexible mind handles uncertainty better than a rigid one. Clear thinkers remain open. They make decisions firmly, but not blindly. They observe reality as necessary for clarity. Not because silence magically solves problems, but because silence allows the mind to process without interruption. Some of your clearest thoughts will arrive when external noise finally stops. This is why many clear thinkers intentionally create moments without stimulation. Walking without headphones. Sitting without screens. Thinking without multitasking. At first, this may feel uncomfortable because distraction has become habitual. But over time, the mind settles. Attention deepens. Awareness sharpens. And with stronger attention comes stronger decision-making. You notice more. You react less impulsively. You stay grounded longer under stress. Most importantly, you regain ownership over your mental state. Because if your attention is controlled by everything around you, eventually your thinking will be too. Pressure becomes dangerous when it captures attention completely and narrows awareness into fear, urgency, or chaos. But a trained mind can redirect attention intentionally. Back to breathing. Back to facts. Back to the present moment. Back to what actually matters. That ability changes how pressure feels internally. The world may remain noisy. People may remain reactive. Uncertainty may still exist. But your attention no longer moves automatically with every distraction. And that steadiness creates clarity. Because clear thinking is impossible without directed attention. Where your attention goes, your mind follows. Chapter 10, Becoming Unshakable. By now, you have seen something important. Clear thinking under pressure is not a single skill. It is a way of relating to yourself, your emotions, your attention, and reality itself. Pressure was never the true enemy. Unawareness was. Most people spend their lives trying to control external conditions so they can finally feel calm. They wait for certainty. For approval. For easier circumstances. For life to stop challenging them. But life does not work that way. Pressure returns. Uncertainty returns. Difficult conversations return. Unexpected problems return. And if your stability depends entirely on external calm, your mind will always feel fragile. This is why becoming unshakable is not about controlling life. It is about learning not to collapse internally when life becomes difficult. An unshakable person is not fearless. They still feel pressure. They still experience doubt. They still feel emotion. The difference is that emotion no longer controls their thinking automatically. They have trained space between feeling and action. They have trained awareness before reaction. They have trained steadiness inside uncertainty. This changes everything. Because once you stop being controlled by every emotional wave, pressure loses much of its power over you. You begin to notice difficult moments differently. A challenge no longer feels like proof that you are failing. Uncertainty no longer feels like danger. Discomfort no longer feels like something that must be escaped immediately. Instead, pressure becomes something you can stand inside without losing yourself. That is real strength. Most people think strength means intensity. loud confidence, fast decisions, emotional force. But true strength is quieter. It is the ability to remain grounded when others panic, to remain thoughtful when others rush, to remain clear when emotions rise. Anyone can react. Few people can remain conscious under pressure. This is why emotional discipline matters so deeply. Not because it makes you cold, but because it keeps your mind functional during difficult moments. A reactive mind becomes controlled by circumstances. A steady mind remains capable of choice. And choice is power. Over time, this steadiness creates trust. People trust those who remain calm during difficulty. They trust those who think clearly before acting. They trust those who do not collapse emotionally every time pressure rises. But even more importantly, you begin trusting yourself. You trust your ability to pause instead of panic. You trust your ability to think instead of react. You trust your ability to handle uncertainty without immediately losing clarity. That self-trust creates inner stability. And inner stability changes how you move through life. You stop seeking constant reassurance. You stop depending on perfect conditions to feel capable. You stop demanding certainty before action. Instead, you learn to meet reality directly. Calmly. Clearly. Consciously. This does not happen overnight. Becoming unshakable is not one breakthrough moment. It is the result of repeated practice. Every time you pause before reacting, you strengthen it. Every time you separate facts from emotions, you strengthen it. Every time you stay present instead of escaping discomfort, you strengthen it. Small moments build mental structure. And eventually, that structure becomes reliable under pressure. There will still be difficult days. Days when emotions feel heavy. Days when your mind races. Days when you lose clarity temporarily. That does not mean you failed. The goal was never perfection. The goal was awareness. Can you notice what is happening internally before it fully controls you? Can you return to steadiness more quickly? Can you interrupt emotional momentum before it becomes destructive? That is progress. Clear thinkers are not permanently calm. They are practiced at returning to clarity. And that ability matters more than never struggling at all. One of the greatest shifts happens when you stop fearing pressure itself. Because pressure once felt dangerous. It exposed emotional weakness, impulsiveness, fear, and instability. But now pressure becomes information. A signal. A moment to apply awareness instead of losing it. You realize that difficult situations no longer need to own your mind. That realization creates freedom. Not freedom from emotion. Freedom from automatic obedience to emotion. And that is what emotional mastery really is. By now, you also understand something deeper. Clarity is not created by thinking harder. It is created by thinking cleaner. Cleaner attention. Cleaner awareness. Cleaner emotional regulation. A clear mind is not empty. It is unobstructed. Fear may still appear, but it no longer blinds you. Urgency may still appear, but it no longer controls you. Pressure may still appear, but it no longer collapses your inner space. You remain present. And presence changes the quality of every decision you make. As this audiobook comes to an end, remember this. Your mind can be trained. No matter how reactive you have been in the past. No matter how overwhelmed you once felt. No matter how often pressure used to control your behavior. Patterns are not permanent. Awareness changes patterns. Practice strengthens awareness. Repetition creates stability. This is how clear thinking is built. Not through talent. Not through personality. Not through luck. Through conscious practice repeated over time. Pressure will continue to test you. That part of life will never disappear. But now you understand something many people never learn. You do not need to eliminate pressure to remain clear within it. You only need to stop surrendering your mind to it automatically. Breathe. Pause. Observe. Choose. Again and again. That is the practice. And over time, that practice becomes part of who you are. Not emotionless. Not perfect. But steady. Clear under pressure. Grounded inside uncertainty. Capable of thought even when emotions rise. Unshakable.